I'm Sam.
And I'm Jackson, and this is your press release.
All right. Welcome to today's episode of Your Press Release. I'm Sam Lucas here, and we have a wonderful guest with Dr. James Lee. Dr. James Lee is a world-class physician. He's also written a book called Broken, A Doctor's Journey Back to a Life Worth Living, as well as he recently released a podcast called Married to Beauty just last week on February 14th. So anyway, we're very excited to have him on today, and we know he has a breadth of many incredible experiences that were life-changing, and I think there's going to be a lot of relevance and application to people going through lots of hard things today. So without further ado, Dr. James Lee.
Well, thank you for having me. Just to have this opportunity to tell my story is amazing, and it's an honor and pleasure. So thank you for having me, guys.
Yes, thank you. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you first explained how in your residency, you're working 120 plus hours per week. You exit residency, you're now working 90 plus hours per week. And you seem to take a lot of pride in that, being the breadwinner for your family and whatnot. Can you go into detail about what you loved about it, the work it kind of took to get there, and just...
I got it. Okay. So thank you for kind of picking up there. I was bred for that. Both my parents were doctors. So my dad was an OBGYN. My mother was a family practitioner. And among the field, OBGYN is probably known to be one of the toughest, the most grueling, that, work the most hours. And so I was kind of raised in that atmosphere. And so when I was working, during residency, working 120 hours a week, and then finishing residency, I got my first job. I'd be the one, volunteering for call. It gave me back to back. I want to, because working 90, 100 hours a week was easy for me at that point. And my dad, I think we figured it out at one point. He averaged 16 hours a day, 6 days a week for 15 years.
Wow.
Years. Yeah, that was his average. And to me, that was like, I was on vacation. I'm working halftime. And to take care of my family, that as a man, I was recently married. Well, not recently married, but I had 2 kids and a young family. And I felt I took a lot of pride in the fact that I was, doing well for my family. I was able to provide. We had a great house. We had great cars. We were going on vacations. I had good schools. So, I was kind of living the dream, right? That's why you do what you do. Kind of take care of your family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's unbelievable to me. That 90, 100 hours a week felt like a vacation to you after residency.
Oh yeah, that was easy. I would take 2. I was known to be the guy to take 2, 3, 4 nights of call in a row, and I would just I would live in the hospital, because that's what I was used to. Residency. Right. That's why it's called residency, because you are a resident. You live there. So to me, it felt like I got to go home, and at least I got to sleep in my own bed at times and be a part of a life. But looking back at it, I probably was spending very minimal time with my family, and the event that kind of unfolded. One of the blessings that came out of it was exactly that. I got to spend a lot of time with my family.
Yeah.
So real quick, where did this phenomenal work ethic come from? It's like, obviously you had the example of your parents, but I can imagine that only goes so far, because that must have been something within you. What exactly was that?
I joked with my parents once, because they were very strict, very, very strict. Like they pushed me hard. I would come home with a 99, and they would ask what happened to that 1%. But I joked with my dad. I said, I just kind of want to do well on my own. You don't have to push me, and the extra effort that you're putting into it's kind of wasted. I joked around like that, and he kind of looked at me and laughed. He's like, "All right, I'll leave you alone." And he kind of he calls it my half attitude, but I think I approach it in a way that I want to enjoy what I'm doing. You know, my dad worked hard, and for some reason he made it look like work. So I kind of said, you know, maybe I want to go into like a second gear and enjoy what I want to do along the way.
That's pretty amazing. So it was more of a calling for you, like if I'm hearing you correctly, like you just enjoyed medicine. So it
Oh,
wasn't a job and just more something fun that you got to do and got paid for it.
well, I think I was again a little bred for it. Ever since I was young, my mother especially, she wanted me to do two things: play the piano and become a doctor. And and in her memory, that's what I've done. She passed away in '95, but I picked up piano because of that. We can talk about that later too. But yeah, though, ever since the very beginning, I had three. Okay, so back before internet, back before our phones were able to tell us anything, the library was really the only place to go, and my parents did not want that to be an impediment, so they literally bought three sets of encyclopedias for our home. There was a Encyclopedia Americana, Encyclopedia Britannica, and the science encyclopedia. It was so three, and my job was to read those, like literally, like not, they weren't there for reference. My job, you know, my mom had me literally read them, and so I found the British one too boring. I couldn't read that. The American encyclopedia was also kind of dry. So, but the science encyclopedia, I was like, okay, I can get my head around that. So, I mean, since the age of 5, 6, 7, I just had one of these around. So I just started understanding these things, and it became second nature. And I was very adept at academics, and loved the fact that there was a place in academia where you could be smart and help people too. I don't know how to explain that in another way, because I always wanted to make sure I was positive about my work, and I know it left the world a little bit better, off. So I thought medicine was the best place to do it.
Yeah. So it was, I mean, your parents absolutely pushed you. I was never forced to sit down and read encyclopedias.
Oh yeah,
That's for sure. But you actually found enjoyment in it, and realized there was something for you there. And you, even to the point where you were able to look at your dad and say, Dad, you don't have to push me anymore. Like, I want to do this. I love this. I'm going to have fun with this, and I'm going to be the best at this.
Yeah, I mean that's. I still remember ever since spelling tests. I just wanted to get them all right. No one had to tell me. No one had to force me. I just wanted to make sure I got them all right. And every time I got one wrong, I kind of like, oh man, I should have studied harder. And I made sure. I think I only missed one once, and that was it. From then on, it was 100%. So when my dad kind of got on me for that, I was like, you don't need to make me feel worse. I already feel bad enough. Like, I feel terrible that I missed that. I don't want that to happen again. And I don't want it to be to the point where I don't want to not make a mistake. I just want to do well. Right. There's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, going through something and not wanting to make a mistake is terrifying. Like, it's a horrible experience. It's like walking on a tightrope, and anytime you make a mistake, you die. You fall off. I don't want that to happen. I want it to be a positive experience. I want a whole carpet in front of me, so that I can dance around a little bit, make sure I can get my stability, and be comfortable doing it. So that's where I am.
And so then your way of obtaining that end was by an excess of preparation, by just the total memorization of, hey, I don't want to get anything wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do all that I can just to make sure that I'm going to get them all right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no,
That's
it's
awesome.
to the point where when you repeat it enough, you know it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's what I told. That's what I tell my kids. I'm like, I don't care how little you know. I don't care how few items that you memorize, but the few that you do, know it so well that you're positive that that's the answer. And what happens is, once you have these little nuggets of truth, of stronghold, where your soul knows the answer, then other things can attach to it. But when you know something like half, you kind of browse it, you look at it, you may be able to maybe pick it out in a multiple choice. You don't really know it. You'll pick the wrong one because you've seen it once before, but was it B or C? I don't remember. But when you really know something, you know what? I can eliminate 3 of these because I know that's the wrong answer. So it improves things. It improves your chances in life overall.
I love that kind of that the switch to just full confidence because you know
Oh yeah.
something's right. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's a really good segue here because we're getting a really good grasp for how just driven, ambitious, and confident you were as a young doctor, working tons of hours, going forward. You're on top of the world,
Oh yeah.
kind of living your dream. And then what happened?
Wham. Okay, so like talk about being on top of the world. Like, so I was working 90 hours a week, 90 plus hours a week. I had just recently, the year before, won Physician of the Year at the hospital that I'm working at. And to put that in perspective, as an anesthesiologist, typically, you don't, no one ever sees the anesthesiologist, right? The OR staff maybe at most, but I was also OB anesthesia. So all the OB staff knew me, all the OR staff knew me, all the surgeons knew me, and everyone voted for me because I knew my stuff. I was on time. I was courteous. I was good to patients. And I actually looked like, because I did care about my work. And so, the year before, Physician of the Year, and I'm working because most of the time I'm working. Actually finishing up a case. Had a patient under anesthesia on the table, asleep, and the surgeon asked for medication to just prior to wake up, and grab it from my cart, and I look down to read the label, and as I tilt my head forward, that motion must have I felt a pop, and it's like a little pea being squished between your fingers. I felt that right behind my eye, between my eyes, but closer to my left eye, and it kind of took me by surprise, and I realized I could not read the medication bottle anymore. Everything turned purple, and I forgot what I was doing and where I was. And I turned around and I looked at the surgeon. I forgot his name, and this is a surgeon that I worked with for 7 years. I had lunch with this surgeon regularly. I've been in his office. We played tennis together. I looked at him, and he was a big purple blob, and so I called him Dr. Barney because I had no idea what his name was. I had no idea what. I said, I have this medication in my hand. I don't know what it is. Don't know what to do with it. And at that point, my left side of my face started to droop. And I started to sway, and I got really nauseated. I fell to my knees. Um, at that point, it was everything. I couldn't open my eyes. The whole everything was swirling around me. Everything was purple. Couldn't see anything, and so with my eyes closed, the surgeon is like yelling at me. Dr. Lee, are you in there? And I'm like, I think so. And he's like, can you wake this patient up? And so I'm like, I think I can. So my eyes are closed. I'm reaching for the machine, the bag, and I'm turning the dials. I'm flushing with oxygen. I'm trying to get. Luckily, I had prepped this patient for wake up because the surgery was done. We were just doing that one little thing, waiting for one test to make sure the ureters were good for the kidneys. And I was supposed to. So I had already cleared everything out, cleared her airways, got everything done. I just needed to turn the dial. So here I am turning the dials. My eyes are closed. I'm bagging her, make sure she's breathing with my eyes closed, and I'm my reaching from under the table because I'm on my knees. Finally, she starts breathing, and I'm thanking God. I'm like, thank God she's alive before I went under. And two gurneys, one for me, take it, and one for the patient. She goes off to the PACU, and I go straight to the emergency room. And I still remember them asking me along the way, hey, again, at the time, the nurse that I used to play tennis with him too. I played with him. I knew him for 4 or 5 years. I couldn't remember his name. He's asking me, do you want me to call your wife? And at that time, I was working in a hospital about an hour and a half away. And I imagined my wife rushing to me in that hour and a half. And everything that I knew that could be going on with me, or at least the high probability, is I'm going to be dead within the next, hour. Brain aneurysm, stroke, hemorrhage. Any of these things aren't normal. This half my face is now paralyzed. I'm dizzy. I can't open my eyes. I'm nauseated. but they ruled everything out. For 16 hours, I couldn't open my eyes. And finally, it kind of went away. No one knew what was wrong because the MRI was broken at the hospital that I was working at that day. And if we had an MRI, I would have found it. So we had to get an MR angiogram, an MRA, which only picks up vessels because we thought it was a bleed. We thought it was a stroke. We thought it was a hemorrhage. We thought it was a vascular accident. And, that was all negative. So they said, it was a migraine. They said, a migraine? I've never had a migraine before. Or it could have been your central cervical stenosis, which came into play later. But it wasn't that either. It took another probably year of just, I was, after this incident, I spoke about this fast, and I couldn't smile. I couldn't emote. I walked around like a zombie for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Loud noises would just send me into like epileptic, shock. Like I wouldn't, I'm not epileptic, but like my whole body would just react to sound, and my brain would shut down. And I was in it. I couldn't work. I couldn't figure out what was going on with me. It was a year before another friend of mine, a doctor friend. Yeah, I told him what was going on with me. He said, that's not normal. And he sent off literally every test he could think of. Like he said, I don't know what it is. We're going to find it. And one test came up positive. We took the right picture with an MRI, and yes, it was a brain tumor. So, yeah, we had an explanation, but like, what do I do now, right? What do you kind of do with that knowledge? The radiologist was the first one to tell us, and we were relieved at first. I have to be honest. My wife and I kind of were scratching our heads for a while. Am I going senile? Do I have dementia? Why am I? And my daughter put it best. She said, "Dad, you're moving at half speed. Like everything's half speed. You're not the same person." And now we have this explanation. Now what do you do? I see the right doctor.
So if I can just interject here real quick.
Absolutely.
So at this point, you're working a ton. All of a sudden, there's this experience, and literally and metaphorically, you're brought to your knees.
Oh yeah.
You can't move. Could you work at this time?
I couldn't. Okay, let me go into further detail. It hurt to think at this point. Like it hurt to think. Like, so if you were to want to get up and get a glass of water, you would think about it. Your brain would process that. Think about the motions. Engage your body, and you go up and get a glass of water. It hurt for me to even think about that. So I would be stuck at the pre-thought because that would hurt. So like I would be, useless was like, I would be staring at blank walls because any pattern would hurt my brain because that took processing power, right? It had to be blank. It had to be quiet. I couldn't watch TV, right? Like you would think, oh, you got it. You're on a break. You need to relax, watch some TV. No, that was a chore for me. Turning on the TV. Do you realize how many steps that is? You got to find the remote first of all. The remote is never in the right place. It's never in the same place. So where's the? Oh my God! Even that froze me. Like I can't find it. Now, if I did happen to find the remote, which button do I press? Oh, I forget. It's the upper right one. Everyone knows the red one, right? It's easy. Not for me. I don't know which button to press, and each time it's a different thing. So I ended up not watching TV. I found it unenjoyable. I couldn't follow the plot line anyway. Didn't know the characters' names, and so for a year I did stop watching TV. Yeah.
And this was a full year between the happening of the event and diagnosis, correct?
Yeah.
So a full year of just not even really being present.
Yeah. My wife calls. Well, actually, that was better than once I was diagnosed and put on chemo. Those are the Bernie
Okay.
years. Those were what my wife calls the Bernie years. Because once I put on that, I was even worse. Like my brain shut down. So like literally, my family would just take me on vacations, take me to work, whatever, and pick me up and plop me down. You know, I would just sit there and stare at blank walls, and wherever they are, pick me up and drop me back down. So I exaggerate a little, but yeah, that's pretty much what it was. I was fairly useless. I could have a conversation with people, like you stand there, but have no recollection of anything that happened.
How did you work
You
through that?
couldn't.
Because
I couldn't.
or go for
I
it.
tried. I tried to
Okay.
work, because I didn't know what was wrong. So I tried to work, but and luckily, okay, my brain worked on processes and automation. So like, if it's something that I could drive, that was easy for me. It's all reflexes and automated. There's no, but I couldn't get from point A to B like a map. You know what I'm saying? Like I could keep you safe. I could be a race car driver, but I had no idea where I was or where I was going. You know, so I could do anesthesia. I could place the needle, and I just didn't know what time to show up. You know what I'm saying? Like what surgeon was that just I was so lost. Everything just the computer system. I could I worked. I tried. So I couldn't work in my old job. Thought it was the old job. Thought it was the commute. Went to a different job. I couldn't use the computer. I thought again, you hate the computer. I hated this computer. I forgot my passwords. I couldn't figure out the logins. Anything new so I couldn't do that job. So and so luckily I realized early that I can't work. I can't work. So my wife was very patient with me that year. Um, as we kind of figured out what was going on.
So
So then let me just ask you, what's going through your head at this moment? Because obviously you said thinking is a chore.
Oh
So
yeah,
what were you thinking maybe about yourself,
I
about
thought
your
it was
role,
I thought I was getting
future?
old. I thought this is the end of the road for me. Maybe I was overworked at the time, but then I went from overworking to not working at all. So I thought it was not working. That you know, but then when we found out it was that I couldn't work, I don't know. My life just for a while just didn't have meaning.
Wow. So that sounds in one instance terrifying, and the next instance just I couldn't imagine being in that kind of a situation. So then you get to a year mark, you get some diagnoses, then what happens? Because obviously you're not
Yeah.
still talking at half speed and
Yeah.
you're able to work. So
Okay.
what was the path to recovery?
So here, okay. About a year and a half on the right chemo, shrank the tumor. It's right between my eyes and right in my brain. So they couldn't do surgery, or they shouldn't do surgery unless they needed to, but they didn't because it shrank, and I have to stay on a low dose to keep it, the right size. But it behaved, and so after a year and a half, kind of recovered a little. Got to the point where I still had no idea where my doctor's appointment. When I go to the doctor's appointment, went to the same doctor, and I still had no idea how to get to her office. Um, and I asked her. I literally remember this day, and I wrote about. I write about it. I wrote about it in the book. I said to my doctor. I said, "Listen, we figured out we had a brain tumor. That I had a brain tumor. I was put on the right medication. It's now controlled. We don't have to worry about it. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to make things worse. When do I come back? Like, when do I become me again? When do I go back to work and pick up my life?" And so she kind of looked at me, and looking back, it sounded kind of patronizing to me at the time. But looking back, I think she honestly was trying to console me. But she she kind of put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "Oh, honey, you know, you don't have to worry about those things. You should be just happy that you're alive. And you know what? This is the new you." And so, like, I think, right? I think she was trying to help me, but I was like, oh my, she just told me that I'm stuck here. Like, I've been dropped off at this bus depot that I didn't pick, and and I got to pick up the pieces. And um, for a long time, again, where did I come from? I didn't. I came from, I don't know, the echelons, the peaks of what that I wanted to be, playing at. Like I was an anesthesiologist. I was working full time. I had a wife and kids. I was able to be a father, and I was able to juggle all of these plates at the same time. And I went from that to like um, literally struggling to put on my shoes in the morning. Like it was like Tetris. Like like there are so many orientations that a shoe could be in that your foot can't fit in. Like it's amazing. Like it would take me 5 minutes to put my shoes on. Like so, um, yeah, yeah. I looked at my life at one point and I just thought that honestly I had images. I still remember them of just letting go. Like I wish that if I could just let go. Because I mean, what am I losing? Nothing. I had no life left. I had no career. I wasn't a husband or a father anymore. Like I could barely, like I could barely function to the point where I could feed and clothe myself. And so, like, what good am I doing for anybody else? So no one would miss me. I realized I started checking out boxes. I said, I went to Yale. I got my degree in molecular biophysics and biochemistry. Got my MD at Stanford. I was an anesthesiologist. I got married to a dermatologist. I had two amazing kids. I started clicking these things off and saying, justifying that I had finished my life. Like I had like a complete life, and I just dreamt of just letting go. And it was a recurring image over and over, probably weeks, maybe months. I don't know how long this was. And one day I realized, I there was nothing wrong with my body. Like it was going to, this heart was going to keep ticking. Everything was going to keep working for another maybe 40 or 50 years. And so I said, I said, you know what? I can't spend the next 40 or 50 years like this. I got to at least know, and it took me a long time to get to this point, but I got to at least know that I'm getting a little better every day, right? In 40 or 50 years, I might have something, right? And so and again, there's a period of fog, and I don't know how long it took. These processes, like these thought processes, it could be days, weeks, months, probably weeks and months, in that range, because there was a period of about 16 months where I kind of fogged out, and I put this kind of all together. I said, I want to improve my brain. Right? What do I need to do to improve my brain? I said, brain is made out of neurons. Neurons are made out of cell membranes. The cell membranes are made out of, and I actually remember this from biochemistry. I said, phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine. And I said, so if I want my body to make phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine, which are the building blocks of the membranes that make up, the neurons of our brain, I want to build myself back. I want to at least prepare my neurons, right? Give it the right building blocks. I said, what do I need to eat? Well, I need to get the right the right nutrients so that my body. And so one by one, I started clicking off nutrients that I wanted for my brain. And I said, okay, I want to build my brain. I said, what else do you need? If you want to build a body, you need to work it out, right? So I said, you know what? Every day I'm gonna work on building my brain. So I'm going to work on this nutrient list. I'm going to work on mental exercise, Wordle, like things. I used to do things like that just to keep working on my brain. Kept feeding it. I said, okay, as long as I'm feeding it the right things, as long as I'm exercising, I can do this. Guess what? After a while, no, you give up because willpower can only get you so far. You got to work on it. Okay, so I boiled it down to three simple things. And I called it the eat, do, think, and you got to do it in that order because the brain it's useless until you got to eat the right thing. Then you got to exercise. You got to mix it. You got to get the blood flowing. You got to get the nutrients up to the brain, and then you got to think. You got to, let's improve my life in some way, in some form or fashion. And I said, okay, now that I fixed my diet. This took weeks. Okay, like even when you start to eat well, it still takes 2 or 3 weeks for it to start actually, like, start working up here. And I said, once that started feeling better, I said, okay, what am I going to do to improve my life? And this is the kind of area where, going back to a life worth living. I said, what am I going back to? And this is where the passion came. This is why I gave up. I said, what am I really going back to? Like, I asked myself, if I can't enjoy that, then all of this is worthless. And I said, well, I can't imagine being a doctor again. I can't imagine working 90 hours a week. I can't. That's way too high. Like, that's like, if I thought that, it actually depressed me. If I thought about that old life, it actually made me feel like giving up because it was too high. But I looked around and I said, you know what? What's really important? What's truly important in life? And I looked at how the things that were important in my life I had kind of neglected and kind of taken for granted. So you know what? I can at least work on those. And if I improve those, it would definitely be worth it. And those things were relationships with my father, my brother, my wife, my children, right? I said, you know what? Whatever it took. And it wasn't a lot. For my wife, it was one morning, I got up and I was able to make her a cup of tea. And this is when it was difficult for me to do anything, but it was easier for me to make a cup of tea for her than it was to put my shoes on, like, I don't know, for whatever reason. And she said, you know what? I noticed you're getting better. And so I said, you know what? I can do that. I started doing that. Like, my dad, every time that I thought about my dad, I always had bad feelings because he was very hard. He was a disciplinarian, and always the only thing he ever told me was work hard. Not the kind of touchy-feely dad that everyone dreams about, right? But he was a great dad. I'm not saying it, but he's just not touchy-feely. So one day I call him, and this is after I'm getting a little better. This is after I know that I'm not going to die. The brain tumor settled, and I'm talking to him. And most of our conversations are less than a minute. I mean, they're very quick. It's like, hi, Dad, how you doing? I'm still alive. Hey, I'm still alive. Your mom's well, and blah, quick. And this time I said, Dad, before you hang up, I want to tell you something. He goes, okay. I said, Dad, I know that we don't say, real things to each other, at all. And but I did want to say one thing to you because of what I've been through. Because I know that I wasn't going to die. I was close to it. I was debilitated to the point where my body really was not functioning. And so I wanted to say at least this before either you or I died. And it's this: that I love and honor you and respect you as a father. I'm thankful for everything that you gave me. And I do everything now as a father to be better, to try to be better than you. And I love you, Dad. And literally the sound that came out of him was like, like he couldn't say anything. Like no words, nothing. And and I'm like, Dad, are you still there? And it was like, click, like that was it. But you know what? That our relationship has gotten so much better because of that. Like after that, the background music that's playing when I thought about my dad before was, always, ominous, anxious. Now it was happy. Like when I'm not talking to my dad, he's not on the phone, I feel good about it. And it's been that way ever since.
Wow. So with this chapter in your life story, there's so much to unpack there. And if I could just point out a couple things and maybe we can talk about it a little bit. The first being when you realized you had to overcome that feeling of there's no point, you decided to take a very patient approach and say, you know what, it might take 50 years of just small daily progress.
No. I knew I had 50 years in this body.
Mm-hmm.
I was trapped in this body for 50 years. So I'm like, I might as well make use of that 50 years.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It was almost the opposite at the time.
Okay. Yeah. But you did decide that you had to get just a little bit better each day. Is that right?
Yeah.
How did you, where did you find the patience to do that? Because I feel like, especially in our generation, it's such a generation of instant gratification, and if they can't have it within a day or two, they don't want it. And so how did you decide I'm going to get better, even if it's little by little?
Because I made it easy for myself, and my kids say I'm the greatest coach because I make everything fun, because I break it down and make it easy. I don't think about the top of the hill. I think about the first couple steps. I made it easy for me. I didn't think about my entire diet. Oh, right, that would hurt your head. That hurts my head. Even just think about an entire. I said, you know what? I'm gonna think about one nutrient. If I could add, if I know that if I add this one nutrient and help me in this area, I'm doing that much better, right? So I just
on that note, like super quick, just on the note, I was curious, what were the foods to boost your brain power? I just thought that would be kind of fun to know. It's like, I need to start eating some of these things.
Okay, well, okay, so I'll tell you, I'll describe it to you the way it kind of clicked into my brain at the time. So I'll reverse this, go back to my biochemistry class. My professor at the time, and I still remember this, we're opening up our books to chapters on essential nutrients. And he's standing up at the beginning of the lecture, and he literally says this. These nutrients aren't that important because we assume that we get plenty of these every day, and in our diet, they're easy, they're plentiful, so you don't really need to pay attention to the next hour. So I literally remember clicking my brain off and studying something else, and and so when I went back, this is fast forward, and I'm like, okay, I want phosphatidylcholine. I want to make phosphatidylcholine. I want my body to make phosphatidylcholine. What is the base ingredients for that? And so I literally picked up my biochemistry book, said, how does our body make that? Flip back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I was like, duh, this is the chapter that he was talking about. And boom, so literally, omega-3 fatty acids. Okay, so omega-3 fatty acids, the body takes that, assembles it like Lego, and puts it together, and it becomes phosphatidylcholine. So you can either ingest phosphatidylcholine directly, or you can take omega-3 fatty acids. Either way, your body treats them almost identically, almost. But yeah, omega-3 fatty acids. How do you get omega-3 fatty acids? They are in, the only way to describe it is fatty fish. They're in cod, they're in salmon, and typically it's not any cod or salmon. It's the ones that are in the North Atlantic, the ones that need to stay warm because it's in their fat. It's the fat. It's not the muscle. So, yeah, there are ways to make sure how about this? You want to make sure you get the right omega-3 fatty acids or phosphatidylcholine in your diet. Otherwise, you're not replacing or repairing up there. So that's step one, and that's only one ingredient. Right? So I could talk like that. Like all told, if you go through the list, there's probably about 35 to 40 like essential. I'm not talking like essential, like like it's nice to have them. Essential as in you absolutely need to have them in your diet. Otherwise, something will break down, or you break down.
Fascinating. So what you did then was you just focused on not the entire diet, but getting a few of these foods or these ingredients every day.
Yeah, well, I would pick one. I would say, look, and I kind of went backwards. I want to fix my brain today, so that's how phosphatidylcholine. And I said, well, the other thing that I want to fix today is kind of my energy. Like I have zero energy. I can't, I can't like get the energy to do more than one proper thing a day. So I want to improve my energy. So what do I do? So I went back to my biochemistry, and this sounds very nerdy, but I don't want people to get distracted. Biochemistry is just, the pieces. It's the owner's manual to a body. So I went back to the owner's manual and I said, what is it that our body does to make energy? And it happens to be something called the Krebs cycle. And I don't want to go into what the Krebs cycle is, but when you go through that, it's the engine that our body derives energy. That's how we get the energy. during that process, what does our body need to sustain that? We make, again, 250,000 different chemicals in our body so we manufacture most of the engine, but there are certain key ingredients that we can't. And what are those? And there were 13 of them, that that our body needed just to sustain that enzymatic reaction. So I made sure our body got those 13. So, and again, one at a time. It wasn't like, oh, I got all 13. It was like, I'm going to pick one today. And then I made sure I got that. So magnesium is one. I'm going to pick another one today. Vitamin B5 is another. I'm going to pick it. So, you know what I'm saying? So one by one. And it wasn't even every day. It was maybe this day I didn't feel like it because I'm just too tired. Like I can't function with that. So little bit by little bit, I was like a mountain climber, right? As long as I got a foothold and got a little higher, I felt like I was accomplishing something.
Which goes
That's
back,
incredible.
yeah, and that goes right back to what you're saying is taking it one day at a time and saying, no, I'm not looking at where I want to be in 50 years. It's what can I accomplish today? I'm going to find one goal that gets me some progress today, and I'm going to work that out.
Yeah, and the easier the better. I mean, literally, like the first step for me was, you know what? I'm just going to write it down. Literally, I used biochemistry. One ingredient, and that was it. That was my first. That was it. But I wrote it down, and at least it became, it made it a little more real. So like, simplifying it was the key to me, making it as simple as possible. And I really did just start saying to myself, eat, do, think, eat, do, think. What am I going to improve today? Either what I eat, what I'm doing, or what I'm thinking. I picked one of those three, because sometimes you get bored of just eating stuff or thinking about eating. Sometimes you get bored of just exercising every day. But you know what? Let's say, who do I want to call today? What relationship do I want to build? How do I want to surprise my wife today? What activity do I want to plan for my children? So I'm like, okay, that's my think for the day. And I think most people would feel pretty good about that. And that good feeling is the kind of life energy that I needed to keep going.
That which that actually leads to the other thing I wanted to unpack from this chapter of your life, where previously success for you looked like learning everything you could, being the best, becoming the best doctor, now being an anesthesiologist working 90 plus hours and being the breadwinner. That was just unbelievable to reach those goals. And you've completely flipped it on its head, and you're no longer the breadwinner. You're no longer working in a career. It's now success for you became essentially, one, getting better each day, just a little by little, but two, working on your relationships. Am I kind of capturing what you described right? Is just a total
100%.
shift of what success even meant.
100%. I still remember this candid conversation that I had with one of my doctors. He took very interest in my case, and he one day read over my files again, and he said, I've been talking to you, James, and Dr. Lee, if I may, because he literally used to just call me James, and I don't mind that at all. But today he was like, Dr. Lee, and he said, I just got to ask you a question. I said, sure. And he said, I noticed, and you told me before, that you have a really fine pedigree. You're a physician. You were working and a productive member of society. And yet you come in here and you seem to have a sense of levity that I don't often see in patients in this situation. Can I ask, how do you feel about your life right now? Like he he asked me like that, and this is the way I answered him. I told him, I said, okay, I know the cards that I've been dealt. And I know that at one point I was, I went to Yale, I went to Stanford, and I listed these accomplishments that he was talking about. I said, so that makes me, I don't mean to brag, but I'd say above average in terms of intelligence, right? And he said, yes. I said, okay. I said, well, what what I'm left with should be at least enough to make me happy. right? I mean, if I don't use every ounce of what I have left to make me feel better about my life, then I'm truly failing as a human being. Like it, um, and I and I said, and I realized it this way. I said, when I was useless to my family, I was ballast to my family. I was dragging them down. Um, and when I was at my lowest, I was miserable. I was negative, complained. I was complaining about my pain. I felt bad. Um, that literally I was, and I realized, I said, even though I can't do anything physically, I said, you know what, if I can at least not be negative, at least if I can't, if I'm not dragging them down, wouldn't that make everything easier? I said, you know what, I did, you know what, I could try that. And I realized beyond that, I can actually raise things. If I physically can't do something, I could at least make them happier. I could find some way to improve their lives. And literally, I had a bottle of water that my wife had given me, and it was sitting on my nightstand. And that bottle, and I thought about that. That was worth $1. If I bought it at a store and I drank it, it would quench my thirst, and it would be worth $1. But the fact that my wife gave that to me made that much more valuable, right? I mean, you can't put a number on it, but it literally meant more to me than that dollar I would have paid for. So I said, whatever she did to that bottle made it better. I said, you know what? Whatever she did, I'm going to do. And I realized it's just effort, it's love, it's thoughtfulness, it's the understanding that I want this relationship to be better because I care about it and appreciate it. And those little steps made me realize, God, it's so fundamental. And we've gotten disconnected from that. And the more fundamental and simple you think about things, the more happier we are. Because why? That's how we are wired. That's our biochemistry. There's no explanation beyond that. We are built this way. That's it.
So I absolutely love this point because I feel like once you change your perspective from choosing to dwell in your negativity, which seems to create lethargy, as you're saying, and then instead shift your perspective to positivity and uplifting yourself and others, there just seems to be better outcomes in your life. Would you
Oh,
agree with
oh,
that?
no, absolutely. And here's the only way I can describe that is this: our and I'll talk about it, the way our brains work, and neuroanatomy wise. When you think of something, and the famous example is snowflake. You think of the snowflake. If I mention snowflake, what that does is open a little part of your brain up responsible for snowflakes. And when that opens up and it demands more oxygen, blood vessels start to swell. They get bigger and bigger. And that whole process takes about 30 seconds, a minute sometimes, to get fully engorged. So during that process, you are becoming better and better at thinking about that snowflake. Same thing with negativity or positivity. Once you start to seed, your brain and your body and your whatever it is gets better and better at thinking about it. And here's the key: once you put emotion and anxiety into it, and adrenaline is pumped into your body, adrenaline amplifies everything that you're feeling. So it doesn't make you angry. It doesn't make you uh, excited. It doesn't make you joyous. No, if you're joyful, it makes you super joyful. If you're anxious, it makes you super anxious. So you now learn, you know what? The level of anxiety that I feel isn't necessarily associated with the actual impact or stimulus on my life. It's just my adrenaline gland telling my brain that, you know what? That little nervousness that I'm feeling, it just got amped up. So little mind tricks like that, and understanding that that's just how your body works, it goes a long way. And those are the mind tricks I had to play on myself because, for lack of a better word, when you are put into a bad mood, it takes more energy that I didn't have. Okay, so I could feel it. I literally would start shutting down. And later on, when so I had a brain tumor and a neck injury. Later on, with my neck injury, I realized once you get anxious or angry or fearful, all these negative, literally your body stops moving. Like it takes a little bit of function out from you. And you could talk about, and I think that explains, why athletes function better when they're relaxed and when they're confident and they feel, feel like on top of the world, because certain nerves are quelled. Well, those nerves for me were I could notice any subtle change because I didn't have many functioning nerves in the first place. So I was in a position that I was very sensitive to all of these things that helped me, and I know, would help everybody, because that's, again, just kind of how we're wired.
Incredible. So how are you then able to take these different mindsets, building on little by little to achieve full recovery? Because like what was that process look like? Was it the medication? Was it the little steps? How did
It
you get to
was
where you are now?
everything. It was everything. I mean, okay, so modern medicine is what kept my tumor from getting bigger. It was chemotherapy that shrank it. It's chemotherapy that's keeping it in check. So that, I mean, I don't want to, especially as a physician, I cannot. I mean, I don't want to say that anything else other than that is what's kind of curing me. I haven't technically been cured, but that's what keeping the tumor at bay. But in terms of building back what, from the, where I was, oh yeah, that was hard work. And that was conscious effort. That was making sure I'm doing the right. I mean, and okay, so also for my body, what is good for the brain is good for the body. I mean, I realized that I had to make an effort to make sure that everything, is staying and maintained in as best of shape as possible. Um, but then the why comes in. So you got to do both. You got to maintain, and you got to make sure the why, the reasons are there. And again, our DNA tells us we got to make sure all these genetic chains are strong, right? So start first with your family, and beyond that, it's close friends. It's and beyond that, and here's where it expands. Once you have healed more fundamentally, you can now, your cup runneth over. Right now, I'm at a point where I want to help other people with at least my story. I'm not a fully, you ask a full recovery. I'm about 80% now. I can
Hmm.
consider myself a functioning human being at this point. I can sit and talk and walk and kind of operate at what I'd call the speed of normal life. But beyond that, in terms of jogging, athletic endeavors, any sustained activity, my body can't quite do that. So I'm at a point where I'm beyond having. I can more than take care of myself. I can take care of my family. I'm doing things to maintain my life. But beyond that, I think I can help people, and at least that way I've been. When I share this story, it kind of. Like Jackson, when I told you this story, you talked about what's going on with you, and you realized, you know what, you're not alone. You're not alone out there. There are people that have gone through what you've gone through, worse, and they've made it through. And I talk about um, the, the 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 realization, the day that it really turned around for me, is that I truly appreciated that I was alive only when I realized that most of us only think about life when we get sick, right? We're on this curve, and we get upset when we dip on this curve, right? And I started thinking about, well, if we're here, how did we get here? And before we got here, where is that? I realized before we got here, there's no curve, nothing. Like it's not even zero. And I realized, wow, the fact that we're even on the curve, no one celebrated that at all. I was just like, I, I said, I literally said, God, I said, whatever caused that to happen, I'll call God. And I said, thank you, God, for my life and the fact that I am flying, and that this deviations up and down doesn't really matter. I'm a doctor. I was a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I'm flying. I'm alive. I have a family. I have a house. I, I'm I'm waking up in underneath blankets, and I'm warm. I'm safe. Nothing's eating me. I mean, I'm not being chased. So I realize I'm in a time of life. I'm in a very, very rare time. Most human beings in life have been worried about something chasing them and eating them, or where's starvation or hypothermia. It's the simple things. Like, so I really said, you know what? I'm thankful for where I am. And you start with those foundations, you realize life ain't so bad.
And so this mindset between your brain tumor and the neck injury, it's kind of taken almost a decade to fully come to this mindset, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you absolutely started to get there when you realized just a couple of years after the brain tumor, okay, I got to start focusing on my family. I got to change
Yes.
where my priorities are.
Yes.
But this whole mindset of just absolute appreciation in everything took a very long time to develop. It sounds like
Yes.
from what you're describing.
Yes. You start slow and you get better at it. You're never perfect at it.
Mm-hmm.
Most people ask, oh, are you always happy? And no, that's not true. But what I'm saying
Right.
is, the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more
Uh-huh.
it's like building any muscle. It's like building
Right.
anything, do anything, and the longer that you can keep it going.
Mm-hmm. So what are you doing with it now? You've talked about you just want to help people. You've talked about starting a podcast with your wife and how you've written a book and are working on publishing it. But what's the goal? What are you using this mindset to accomplish now?
Well, okay, that's a great question. The way I say it is, I'm going to try and impact as many people as I can within my circle. That's first and foremost. So, like, my wife, my kids. I I noticed this. I noticed that most people, or not most people, I noticed this in some people, that they treat their barista and they speak to their barista nicer than they speak to their spouse. Like, I noticed that you're standing in line, you're waiting for your coffee, and you're like, "Hey, you got your purse? I need $5. Oh, hi, yeah. Can I buy? Can I get a cappuccino?" I'm like, well, so I would. I said, first and foremost, I'm going to reverse that. I said, I'm gonna treat my wife and children better than I treat anyone that I speak to on any given day. I said, at least I'm going to hold that standard.
Uh-huh.
And then anyone that I meet. And you said, what do I want to educate them as much as possible. So I'm giving talks. I've given talks at UCSD about the science of happiness. And I gave this to STEM students at UCSD, where you know what, you're learning your biochemistry, you're learning your math, you're learning your calculus, and you think that this is all there is to life because you put yourself in this major that really doesn't include anything else, and no one is out here to tell you what's really important in life. And I said, you know what? There's a science, and I broke down science, the science of happiness, like down to the endorphins, the neurotransmitters that our brain actually emits and needs to work on a daily basis. So when I break it down that way, I have these science and STEM students coming up to me and saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that my happiness is actually important to my success in life." And I said, "No, absolutely." And so I have friends that are signing me, or kind of aligning for me talks at various clubs, um, and I don't know. I'm just those are the opportunities that are presenting themselves, and I'm just going to see where it goes from there.
That's awesome.
So then, if I can, what
Yeah.
are a few of the ingredients of the science of happiness? If you could list like 3, just real quick ones.
Oh, the science of happiness. Oh, wow. Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me. Okay, let me set the background, because I think it's fascinating how the brain is kind of designed. So every neuron in your brain is pretty much plugged into at least one other neuron, and some up to another 1,000 neurons. Okay, so every neuron is at least connected to one other neuron, and some connected to thousands of neurons. So essentially, each neuron is going to be connected to every neuron in some form or fashion. If you've ever played the game of 6 degrees of separation, you're related to everyone on the planet, right? Similar thing in the brain. Every neuron is interconnected, and it works on a sort of recursive fashion. I don't want to get too into the technical details, but I will describe it this way, and you can just understand it this way. If these 5 neurons are responsible for, I don't know, recognizing somebody, and okay, so actually, I'll take it even back. They did research on a epileptic patient a number of years ago, trying to find the exact center for what's causing her epilepsy. They accidentally found this neuron and they called it the Errol Flynn neuron. Because why? Every time she saw a picture of Errol Flynn, it fired. And only when she saw Errol Flynn. And in any picture, he could be disguised in sunglasses, he could be upside down, he could be wearing a hat, it didn't matter. So there's this theory that when the brain gets really good at things, what it does is it organizes all these neurons. So these 100 neurons have to fire to, I don't know, move your right arm. These 10 neurons now recognize that these 100 neurons fire every time. Like, okay, that's a tennis stroke. And it goes down to what? One neuron that says, you know what? Fire that forehand. Boom. And then now you're ready. So that takes years, right? I said, what if the same thing is true about happiness? I said, it might take years, but you could try to take that first step. If you want to be happy, you want to practice that, you've got to get closer to that, right? You've got to find at least, and literally for me it was, I didn't even know what made me happy. Figure out what makes you happy, figure out even something small. I said, that cup of tea that made my wife happy, I said, you know what, maybe I'll make myself a cup of tea. Oh, it did make me happy. Like it literally took those simple things, because when your brain doesn't work, you realize it takes function even to be happy. That's a biochemical process that your brain has to process that. It takes energy. It takes certain neurotransmitters that you have to have all the fundamentals in place, right? So even just that understanding alone, I think gets you a long way. So I don't know. That's
incredible.
Again, that's just a little piece of science of happiness.
Right.
If I can dial that down between all the neurons, happiness is learned, and happiness can be a habit.
Everything that we do, okay, the more times you do it, the easier it's going to get, because fewer and fewer neurons are needed to do the recognition. Does that make sense? But it only through repetition, because no one can say, I know how to do a forehand the very first time, because not one neuron is connected to all the other neurons perfectly in sequence, in the right order and the right timing to create that forehand. But over years and years and years, your body has kind of created the right chain, and down to that eventually. I don't think everything gets down to one neuron, right? Because we don't need to be able to recognize everybody instantaneously. But some people emotionally we get attached to, like Errol Flynn or whatever, and it gets down to that single neuron. I don't think we need to do that for everything, and I don't think we can. I don't think the body is designed to waste energy that way. That I'm going to dedicate one neuron to everything that we do. No, but I believe that our body prioritizes and says, you know what, I really like Errol Flynn. I'm going to make sure I know who he is. You know what, I really appreciate and enjoy and want to make myself happy. So I'm going to make sure I do it. So you put that first, and the only way I can describe it is you put that first so that your cup can trickle over, your cup can run over. You have to fill this up first, and then you can help other people. And when you do that, you realize that is the true thing that makes everything go back. It's the endless perpetual machine, right? You make sure you're happy. You make sure someone else, and that's what makes you happier and able to make this thing keep going.
That's incredible. I love that.
Thank you. And it's really that. I mean, it's really that simple. I don't know how to explain it any other way. Again, I had to go down to really fundamental. Like I couldn't do anything, right? So what I just essentially realized, it boiled down to happiness. It boiled down to making sure that these neurotransmitters are fired in a certain way. And at one point, I want to talk about music too. My mother wanted me to play the piano when I was a kid. I hated it. She made me play 30 minutes and hated it. When
I can relate.
Yeah, I go to high school.
Me as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this is the way it's taught. Because fast forward, I'm now 42. I've been diagnosed with a brain tumor. I can't do anything. I'm literally looking in the mirror, practicing how to say hello, because I'm like, hello, how are you doing? Hello. I can't get, I can't, so I'm practicing how to smile. Hello, how are you doing? And I get to, like, hello, and I realize, what is that? That's music. I said, that's practicing something over and over again until you get it to the point where it sounds good. And I said, this is the most important thing. It expresses what you want to express. Because just saying what you want to say isn't it right. That's not how I want to come across.
Mhm.
So I realized that's music. And Sam, you said you're frustrated with piano. I went back to the piano and I said, I'm gonna play music. I don't care about the notes. I don't really care anymore. I don't even care if it sounds good. I just want to literally at first just bang on the keys because I had nothing else to do and I needed to express myself in some way. You see what I'm saying? Like I needed to figure out how to, because I was not able to get it out. Right. So I'm sitting here learning how to, and now after years, maybe about a year and a half of just literally just I had this keyboard in my closet so that no one else had to hear this terrible noise that was because I'm just pounding on keys. I'm just banging and just making. After a year and a half, it started making chords and I'm playing music and like I'm playing for church now and it's like um, uh, there's no other way to describe it. I went back to learn how to express myself and it's opened a new channel of being able to express myself.
I I feel like we're learning so much on just the way to look at life more than anything. And it it definitely applies to the relationships. I mean, you've made that very clear.
Yes.
It applies to happiness. I mean, half of it's the science of happiness. How does that apply to creating the life you're looking to create? Expressing yourself, bringing in the science of happiness, focusing on others. How do you get that to construct a life that you feel is not only worth living, but is encouraging of others to do the same and meaningful? Because you talked about not having meaning. Where
Yes.
does this all fit in?
Where does it all fit in? It's um man, I can't okay, so w- that feeling that you're talking about, the feeling that you're helping somebody, the feeling that you're okay, right, even right now, that feeling of connection that
Mm-hmm.
we're having, that you and I are having, Jackson, you and I are having, Sam, all three of us together, we're in this joint consciousness. I am telling you, and I have no explanation for why. It just is. We are designed this way as animals, as human beings, as organisms that share the neurotransmitter system that we were wired with. Okay, it just happens to be that we like people. Okay, we need it, we crave it. I still remember there is the movie I, Robot with Will Smith. I might be dating myself, but all the robots, if you remember in that movie, they tended to like to congregate together in any empty container. They like to be together, and I always liked the way they wrote that because, um, as human beings, that's the kind of the way we are, right? We don't like to be separated. We like to be kind of put together in groups because alone. I mean, okay, this is also what got me thinking. You know those survivor shows? You know, you're out in them by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that is probably the the worst way to try to live, right? That's why they are on this show and that's why they have to survive. You know, not just the food alone, but you're alone, like you're by yourself. Like psychologically, I'm trying to imagine that. I was subjected to that for 12 hours every day. You know, because I couldn't move when I hurt my neck. I crushed my neck traveling in Korea. This is after I'm recovering again from my brain tumor. I'm thinking, oh, I'm feeling better. Let's go, let's go visit some relatives. Carrying luggage, I crushed my spinal cord, and as I'm sitting there, um, recovering, can't do anything. I realize any little thing, any little 12 hours a day, I'm staring at the ceiling with nothing. I can't watch TV because I can't bend my neck. I can't read. I can't do any emails because I can't bend my neck. Like you need somebody. You're craving connection. You just need to talk to. You need that. the flow of ideas. Anything that doesn't come from your own brain, you need, you know what I'm saying? Like you can only, and the best way to describe it is this. Most of the things that I was given in life, I asked for and got, but I didn't recognize. And I kept scratching my head, like, how come I'm not better at recognizing it when it first happens? Like my wife, my children, like I couldn't have imagined what my kids looked like, right? So like, but I realized that if I was limited to what I could imagine, how good could that possibly be, right? How limited would the universe be if it's limited to what I could imagine? So I was like, oh, obviously I'm not going to, it's not going to be immediately obvious to me because it's new, it's better. It's in a combination that I could not possibly have put together in my simple, small, little individual brain. And that's why we're supposed to be together. That's why you and I, and we're all talking, because we can't advance without this connection.
Yeah. So it's creating the life you're focused on creating through all these concepts we've talked about is about opening yourself up to others and being there for each other, and in reality just striving to make the world a better place together.
Absolutely. Because what is life other than just surviving? If you're just surviving, right? You're eating, you're going to work, you're driving to work in your car. What's your car? Just to drive you to work? No, you right. You bought your car because it's supposed to take you on vacation. Life's supposed to be fun, right? That's that word, and fun, I think, has been diluted these days. It's enjoyment, it's entertainment, it's posting. I don't. That's not what I consider fun. Fun to me is anything that allows me to help connect to somebody that I care about. Okay, if it's not somebody that I actually care about, enjoy spending time with, it's a waste of my time. Like I'm not using that time in a positive way for someone that I care about, and that matters to me. But once I turn that around, and you know what, most of the things that, take my son for example, most of the things that he likes to do, if I'm doing them with him, I actually do enjoy them. I wouldn't have otherwise, but I actually do enjoy them because I'm kind of living it through him. And I realized, you know what, I may not be able to build these at that time. I couldn't move my neck, whatever. And I'm talking him through the designs, but we did this. It's the engineering project together. I couldn't do the actual work, but I was helping him in whatever way I could, and I was encouraging him, and say, hey, you know what? Let's try it this way, and trying to be as positive about it as possible while doing it. Not doing it like, why did you do it this way? It's like, hey, you know what? Why don't we try this way? And I was very conscious of that, and I firmly believe, and I think you can ask him, and he's admitted this in the past, but and with my daughter, but he says, yeah, that that's what made the difference. That's what kept me making things better and trying to want to be better and enjoying the process, and and I can list a number of things that he's done and taken to the nth degree. Varsity tennis, varsity golf, medals in the science Olympiad, and so he's and music. So he's talented in so many different areas. That's what I take pride in, because I believe that again, success, talent, being good at something, all these positive. That's designed to make us better. It will make it's guaranteed to make you better, because that's how we're wired. And you take any number of things that we're supposed to be doing. No, there's no supposed to. We're just wired that way. And once you just accept it, once you realize that's what human nature is, you work backwards and say, okay, what made me happy, or what made this happen, and you go back and say, oh, it was very simple. It was just really, making sure that I got my cup of tea this morning, and or my son, was able to make sure he got his golf equipment in his car this morning. That's a success even in and of itself. So once you start marking and noticing positives, here's the other concept of science of happiness that I just, since I'm on this subject, negativity. We are designed to pick up a negativity because we avoid it, because that's most of what happens in life. We are trying to avoid accidents. We're trying to avoid spills. We're trying to avoid injury. So we're looking at the world in terms of negative. But when you see negativity, guess what? You are thinking negative. So the first question is, well, if you're not avoiding accidents, what are you doing? I'm like, no, I'm going to get there safely. Same thing. But once you view it positively, doesn't that it sets in a sense of ease and peace and happiness. You know what? I hope you arrive safely, as opposed to don't get into an accident. Same thing, right? But it's a very different, subtle thing. But every time you do that, it clicks a little positive. It's a scale of happiness, right? And you don't need one big thing. You can have a lot of little things. And most of it is, you know what just happened 5 seconds ago? Our brain doesn't remember it. So keep doing little things on a slight continual basis every 5 seconds, small thing. And your brain will remember positive things.
I think it's a phenomenal just lesson that is so needed right now of just the importance of being positive. I know for me, one thing that I've been trying to do a lot recently is just to be positive in the form of gratitude. So multiple times a day, I'll just stop and think about what are 5 things that I'm grateful for. And it almost seems a little bit silly, but I almost especially prioritize the mundane. Like if I'm in my car, I'll be like, oh, you know, I love my car. Like, wow, like my car's so great. Or I'll just be in my bed and I'm like, you know, I'm grateful I have a soft blanket, you know, or just these simple things. But it truly helps me to create a positive mindset and really kind of protect my mind from a lot of the negativity because it's so prevalent in our society right now. So I love that reminder there.
Especially the car. And I'm the same way, Sam. Think about before the car, people like had to walk or ride a horse. Or I mean that to me, I'm like, we have so much freedom and we have so much capability now. We can the ability to even work. Not that people are like, oh, I got to go to work, but just the ability to get to work. We have a car to do it. I'm marveled every time that I get into my car, and I try to be thankful that I get to wherever I'm going safely every time I do it.
That's amazing. So, if the answer to this question might be a little bit obvious to anyone who has listened to this conversation, or even to Sam and myself, but going back to the name of our podcast, Your Press Release, if there was a press release written about you, whether you want to look at that now or in the future, and whether you want to look at it from a personal angle or a career angle, what would that press release say, or what would you want it to say to describe who you are and the success you've had?
You know what? At this point, I wanted to say, you know what? I'm back. Dr. Lee is ready. And I'm hitting life. How about this? I'm hitting life in a way that is so new that I don't even know where it's going, to be honest. And I don't care because, again, I know I won't recognize it. What is best for me is not going to be recognizable. All I know is that I'm going to keep at it in a positive attitude. I'm going to take every opportunity I get. Again, like this one. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Jackson, for taking interest and taking note and allowing me to at least tell you guys the story. Because again, every time I've shared this, every time I've told somebody this, it's made me feel better, and I really believe it. Because of the way our brains are designed, we're creating new connections and subtracting and nipping the buds of old connections all the time. And every time I talk about it in a positive way, and I know I've helped somebody, guess what? Some of those old negative ones are eaten away, and I've created new positive ones. So I think back on those times now, and it used to be sad, depressing, and painful. And now I can talk about it. Just literally, I could talk about it now and smile. I couldn't do that for years. I mean, I would be crying. I'd be taken back to that pain. I couldn't. People were just like, I couldn't. They couldn't talk to me anymore. They're like, oh no, he's off into one of those again. But now I can, talk about it in a way that's positive. So, yeah, thank you for that again.
Well, thank you. I can definitely admit that if anything, your story has at least impacted me this go round.
Oh,
and I appreciate the new view you've been able to provide on life and the way we should approach it, and the open mindset of just seek after the positivity in any situation.
In every chance
Yeah.
you get, every chance. And I've gotten to the point where not 100% of the time, it still happens 5% of the time where someone cuts you off and you get angry. But I'm to the point where 95% of the time I'm like, you know what, that guy must be late. Go ahead, So that took a lot. That took a lot of practice, but that makes the commute so much better. You're just the level of anxiety, the level of hormones that are pumping through you goes way down. So it's simple things like that. It builds on each other.
I love it.
And with that, I think we'll wrap it up here. So we thank you, Dr. James Lee, for being on today. And we're super excited to see what wonderful things you're going to do in the future with your study of happiness and all the wonderful lives that it's going to touch. So I really think you're going to do some amazing things, and I can't wait to see it myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.